You are listening to Based in Fact, a true crime podcast. Join host Lisa O'Brien and Kyle Evans as they examine America's most infamous true crime cases as they were established in our courts and the basis for the decisions of the appeals courts, not the court of public opinion. Here's Lisa and Kyle.
Welcome to Season 2 of Based in Fact, a true crime podcast. I'm your host, Lisa O'Brien, and I'll be flying solo host-wise on this bonus episode. On Tuesday, May 30th, 2023, I received what you might call a scoop in the state of Oklahoma versus Eugene Glossip. Explosive new information has come to light exposing the fact that AG Gentner Drummond so-called independent investigation wasn't truly independent and did nothing more than parrot some of the findings of Reed Smith LLP, a well-known anti-death penalty advocacy firm. Of course, longtime followers of the case will have recognized many of Rex Duncan's so-called findings from Don Knight's 2015 Dog and Pony show prior to Glossip's then scheduled execution. Then, as now, every one of Knight's claims was rejected by the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. These zombie claims went on to fuel the innocence fraud efforts of Joe Berlinger in killing Richard Glossip and are the talking points relied on by Glossip's advocates in their efforts to influence the court of public opinion. Tonight, I'm joined by Jennifer Harmon, who's here to talk about this new information, which irrefutably demonstrates that the fix was in on the Glossip case the minute Gentner Drummond took office. The troubling facts regarding Rex Duncan's so-called investigation, his lack of objectivity, and the AG's decision to abandon the Treese family in favor of convicted murderer Richard Glossip. And good evening, Jennifer.
Hi, Lisa. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you so much for joining me.
I just want to give a shout out to Kyle, wherever you are out there, and my counterpart, Amy, from the Oklahoma Victims Innocence Project, who's been hard at work at doing a lot of organizing for our group. And specifically, before we get started, I also want to acknowledge the Treese family in these final and crucial chapters, paragraphs, and moments as we hopefully get to the end of what will be justice for Barry Treese. And so I want to recognize the Treese family and let them know we are sticking with you to the very end until it's done.
I second that. I want to stand with the Treese family. I will do anything in my power to get this information out there, to expose the fact that now the person who is supposed to protect the citizens of Oklahoma is siding with a convicted murderer and parroting that convicted murderer's story du jour. Because it will change again. As we've seen with Richard Glossip, he can't keep his freaking story straight.
Right. And as recent as today, I'm just going to call it what it is, our corrupt, newly elected Attorney General, I don't know if he's nervous about some filings that are about to hit SCOTUS or what, but he filed for an extension today, wanting more time to be able to read the different filings that are going to come out from other parties. And I think that's just a bunch of malarkey. You've said what you're going to say about the case, and anything that you can say. And so really, I hope that SCOTUS denies him the 30 days. So, I mean, why should you get extra time to look over other people's filings so that you have an opportunity to respond? I mean, I understand you're the AG, but
let me interrupt you. First of all, he's likely to get it.
Right.
But this actually is a sign. And remember, he has aligned himself with Richard Glossip and Don Knight.
Yes.
So what he's doing is they would not be able to address the amici briefs.
Mm-hmm.
So he is now saying, okay, well, he's going to address them. And that's why he's asking. Now, he's a total coward to do it. You have your position. You're in support of Glossip. Go ahead and file your brief. Support Glossip. Let the amici file their brief and let the chips fall where they may.
Right.
But they're afraid. And so
They should be
they
afraid.
need somebody. They need to have something. And so Drummond's going to address these briefs. And it's going to be the one good thing about him aligning himself with Don Knight is that they don't have a solid evidentiary footing. They don't have a solid legal argument footing.
No, they don't.
And they tend to just throw everything at the wall to see what's going to stick. Right.
And fortunately for the Treese family, they now have representation that is a formidable opponent. That's the best way I can describe the person representing them. Someone in local media referred to him as a professor. Yeah, sure, he's a professor, but I think he's probably going to eat their lunch. I expect it. And if I saw this guy coming down my street and he was my opponent, I would want to turn and run in the other direction.
Paul Cassell has probably been writing legal treatises since before that reporter was wearing freaking long pants.
Right.
Paul Cassell's been around. I remember 30 some odd years ago, his treatises on Miranda. He's been a victim's advocate for many, many years. He's a former Court of Appeals judge. I believe he was on the 10th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right.
I could be mistaken about the circuit, but I know he was on the Federal Appeals Court.
Right.
And he had to step back from some of his advocacy work during that time. But I'm thankful that he's back on the side of right and advocating for victims again.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think he ever stopped. I think he's been advocating maybe as of late for some of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, but he's no longer on the Court of Appeal.
Right.
While he was on the Court of Appeal, he had to step back.
Right.
Because he would have had to remain impartial. But again, he's, and he couldn't be perceived as on the side of victims no matter what when he was deciding criminal cases before the 10th Circuit. So, but again, I mean, I think he had to step back a little. I think he's always going to have that in his heart, but it was a practical requirement.
I just know that the guy's got a CV that if I were Don Knight, I would be nervous. If I were Gentner Drummond, I would be nervous. And, if it's not just John Doe, I would be looking at it going, this isn't just some average Joe. This is Mr. Cassell. As you guys checked out his CV. So I'm just very grateful that he stepped in and their firm stepped in. Once they realized, we thought the Julius Jones clemency hearing was bad. I don't think anything could be any worse. And I don't even know if it's ever happened where an attorney general, newly elected AG, takes the time to not only not advocate for the court ruling and that he was found guilty and for the victims, but actually spends 5 minutes on superficial talk, then turns it over to the Reed Smith anti-death penalty people trying to get Glossip out of jail.
Correct. And I think that is, and people called it unprecedented, and they're correct. It is unprecedented, but not in a good way.
Exactly. I mean, how do you just walked right into that? But of course, the stuff that you and I got from the sources, these are solid sources. They're from court records, subpoena records, all kinds of records that include phone calls where there is clearly, just to jump ahead, the attorney general said he was going to have this Rex Duncan guy do an independent report. It's not an independent report at all. He just basically took from the Reed Smith report and got paid a lot of money to do that. And, they've got phone calls between Mr. Duncan and the Reed Smith people talking about this and what they need to put in it and this and that. And then then it gets back to the players involved initially, and all of these guys, this little cowboy posse from Oklahoma, they're all been donating to each other's campaigns for years. And Drummond was a little Boy Scout buddy with Mr. Duncan. So I don't know I don't think their commonality anymore has anything to do with Glossip. It's just money and donations to campaigns.
Correct.
And I have never in my life ever thought that public safety, I always thought it was off limits with shit like this, pardon my French, but apparently it isn't. And so politicizing public safety and advocating for a criminal is just absolutely sacrilege.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I had a sense when Drummond came into office that there was something rotten in Denmark, so to speak. And when he said Rex Duncan is an independent I knew then it wasn't going to be independent. Right. And then, of course, I was not surprised when I read Rex Duncan's report about how much time he spent with Don and Amy Knight. And I noted the absence of any time spent with Connie Smotherman, Fern Smith, Gary Ackley, to counter. Also, another thing that's interestingly absent is even though Mr. Duncan cites these errors that he perceives rendering the 2004 trial unfair to Glossip, such as the clemency hearing and the cross-examination questions from Patricia High, he fails to acknowledge that these were all presented in a 2015 post-conviction writ that was denied by the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. And it seems like Rex Duncan didn't bother to read a single appellate opinion regarding the history of the case or the legal review that has taken place over the last more than 20 years.
Right. And what's become apparent, I think, too, and from the information that we got, you and I, in the last 24 hours, the real thing, and especially in Oklahoma, that people need to know that tells you the fix is in with the attorney general and the Glossip cowboy posse of Justin Jackson, McDougal, and Humphrey, is that AG Drummond has refused to speak to the prosecutors in the case despite repeated requests from the victim's family and Oklahoma prosecutors. How is that independent then, if you're only talking to one side and you're refusing to speak to the people on the side in working in an area that you took an oath to represent? It's just so blatantly obvious what's going on. And people need to really understand the moment that anybody who's any position of power or elected official says, I watched this TV show. that's when you should turn and run and say, wait, what's the name and the case? And I'm going to go read about it, because I watched that docuseries. I even pulled up the transcripts, and there's nothing in there about the case stuff at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I agree. I mean, Joe Berlinger has done this before with the West Memphis 3.
Okay.
He came in, he and his late partner, Bruce Sinofsky, were doing a documentary. They got wind of this case that was just happening. They came to Arkansas. Of course, they're a bunch of New Yorkers who think that anybody that lives below the Mason-Dixon line is miles beneath them culturally. And they come in and they entrench themselves with the victims' family. They lied to the victims' families. And then they made their documentary. And the hilarious part is that what they made for that particular version was ambiguous.
Right.
And some people were able to watch it and think that they were guilty. So then they followed up with Paradise Lost 2, and that, make no mistake, they were going after Mark Byers.
Right.
Of course, they've been proven so wrong, but they won't admit it, because then in Paradise Lost 3, who's the new suspect? Terry Hobbs. So, when you're telling the truth, your story doesn't change. When you're lying, you have to change the story, because you either forget what you said, or you realize that what you said doesn't make a damn bit of sense. And so you try to come up with something that makes more sense.
Right. And the only person in the Glossip case whose story has never changed substantively is the person who swung the bat.
Correct.
And he was rightfully convicted when he pled, and he'll spend the rest of his life in the clink for it. However, he's sticking to the truth and the facts of what really happened. And so he's not off the hook for what he did, but he's in the clink. He's being accountable, and he is sticking to the facts. And so I don't want to say I give him props, but they've tried to influence him even. And props to him for sticking to his guns and saying, no, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
And he's not even really the reason that Glossip was convicted. They love to say that, but that's not really why. And if that were why, then for the last 25 years, 4 different attorney generals, all of the appellate courts, and all of those things they have filed, in one of those, if it really was just about Justin getting Richard convicted, one of those multiple filings, somebody would have said, you know what? Something's wrong here. We can't convict based on just Justin Sneed. But that's not, in fact, how Richard was convicted at all. And so all the courts have agreed he's never won an appeal. He won that second trial, and rightfully so, because his attorney was an idiot. But from that point forward, nobody has given an inch to him, because there isn't an inch to give. He's got nothing.
Right. And, that's something too that Don Knight spends a little bit of time. He's impugned Billy Hooper's credibility. He's impugned Cliff Everhart's credibility. He's tried to say, oh, well, I've disproven embezzlement, except when he refers to the destroyed evidence.
Yeah.
Or box of destroyed items in the case.
Right.
But he for the most part ignores what led police to suspect Richard Glossip in the first place.
Right. Which is, drum roll, please,
Glossip's statements.
There you go.
After he knew Barry Van Treese was dead.
Right.
He told Billy Hooper Barry got up early and had gone to breakfast and was going to get some materials. They were going to start working on the motel.
Mm-hmm.
He told her that Barry rented room 102 to two drunks who broke the window. He
Mm-hmm.
told her not to put it on the housekeeping report, that he and Sneed would clean themselves. Later, Billy Hooper got a call about finding the car in the Weoki Credit Union, and Glossip was forced to return from his little shopping trip at Walmart, where he was buying things that one would think you might use to hide a dead body in a hotel room.
Uh-huh.
Glossip went through, I'm not going to detail everything, but I mean, Glossip went through the fiction, the pantomime of searching areas around the motel with Cliff Everhart and Deanna Wood, even
Right.
though he knew Barry, right where Barry was, and
Mm-hmm.
that Barry was dead. And
Right.
before I go any further, I will refer to Mr. Van Treese as Barry.
Okay.
I don't mean any disrespect to anyone listening. I simply find it's more personable than
Yeah.
calling him Mr. Van Treese.
Yeah, I agree. This is personal. And this family's been through hell. I think
And so I mean no disrespect
yeah,
to Mr. Van Treese.
right. Right.
Let's see. Donna Van Treese. He told her at 3:30 p.m. that he saw Barry between 7 and 7:30 a.m. He told Ms. Van Treese that Barry said he was going to buy supplies for the motel and would be back later. He also assured Donna Van Treese that when he saw Barry at 7 o'clock in the morning, he looked and sounded fine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a wonder Richard Glossip's nose doesn't grow. He
Well,
also promised to check all of the rooms around the motel property to search for Barry. Again, these are statements he's making when he knows Barry Van Treese is dead. And no amount of lowering Richard Glossip's IQ below freezing will ever adequately explain why he said these things to these people when he knew at that moment that he voiced these sayings or made these statements that Barry Van Treese was dead.
Right. The only thing he has ever said, and he said it in the second interview with police when they finally arrested him when he was about to leave town. I'm sorry I lied, guys. I was just, I didn't want to lose my girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the 2014 clemency hearing, though, he was asked, he had no response when he was asked, why did you not call law enforcement when you knew he was dead? And he had zero response. He didn't even offer the I didn't want to lose my girlfriend thing.
Mm-hmm.
So people need to understand, let's make this perfectly clear. Richard Glossip is the person who got himself caught up in this. And Justin Sneed didn't even come into the picture with the police department for a whole week.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't a meth fiend. If you watch the tape, he's quiet. He's not shaking. He's just sitting there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something too that Don Knight, just Kevin McDougal, Humphreys, Justin Jackson, they all misrepresent. What they're finding out about Justin Sneed is not exculpatory. It does not prove Richard Glossip's innocence.
Right.
It is additional impeachment evidence that might have been used in cross-examination of Justin Sneed during his original testimony at trial. But so far, nothing they have ever found would have changed the outcome of Glossip's trial.
Exactly. And I think that's what people forget. And I think we learned that lesson for sure with Julius Jones. That was like a crash course in how the law and the court system, these cases work. I mean, it doesn't, you could have the golden globe of piece of evidence, or you think it is, But in the grander scheme of already being convicted, now being guilty, does that would it have rendered a different verdict? And they haven't produced anything that would render or even come close to rendering a different verdict.
Mm.
And the courts have all said so. If people just stop for a minute and read that stuff, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But, unfortunately, Mr. Drummond did not necessarily take this position until he got elected. I mean, even as recent as October of 2022, our former attorney, John O'Connor, just totally annihilated the Don Knight appeal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Went through it point by point, and that during election time, there were comments from Drummond going along with that. But the moment he got elected, any kind of talk about that, it just totally evaporated, and he hired his Boy Scout buddy friend to do this alleged independent report, which wasn't an independent report at all, and he got paid a lot of money. He got paid a lot of money to cut and paste what Reed Smith wrote.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he was paid what, $15,000 per month for 2 months of work,
right?
And he's got an additional $90,000 under the contract with the AG's office. So what other bullshit is he going to produce? In what other cases? What's his next case? Is he going to come out with something like that Sanchez guy is innocent, even though the DNA evidence says otherwise?
Right.
I mean, really, you're just stretching the bounds of your duties and making a mockery of the justice system. And McDougal and Humphrey have done that as well.
Oh, absolutely.
In their criticism of the Court of Criminal Appeals, who is applying the law. Now, I've said it before, if they really don't like the law, they need to change it. But something tells me they can't get any of their judicial reform changes out of a committee and into actual enactment, because his conviction integrity unit has never passed.
Yeah.
But and I want to address real quick, because the primary basis of Drummond and Duncan to claim that Glossip's conviction is faulty is that a note with the name of a doctor was material evidence withheld from the defense. Now, when you look at it in context, you have defense attorneys who saw that Justin Sneed was prescribed lithium in jail and did not seek records or any information about that prescription at the time. So what makes them think, Drummond, Duncan, Don Knight, and all the other dumbasses, what makes them think that the defense attorneys finally getting some name or form of a name, because it's not even the correct name, that they're going to go out and do the investigation that they didn't do with the prescription of lithium in the first place?
I mean, I don't really understand where they're going with it. I mean, they think this is why Glossip should get a new trial or something.
They're grasping at straws.
Yeah.
They did not need the name of the doctor. The note that they found, if the note that they found had said bipolar disorder lithium, maybe I would say, you know what, whoever withheld that information didn't pass it on. And we don't have anything from Woodard or Lyman that says they didn't have the information.
Well, do they know way back when or whenever? So all they did was
This would be 2004.
okay.
And that's another thing. Don Knight, Reed Smith, and I believe Rex Duncan are seriously confused if they think that they could use problems with the 1997 trial to impugn the integrity of the 2004 trial.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
barking up the wrong fucking tree.
Because Judge Twyla was the judge in both trials. So I mean,
No. Twyla Mason Gray was not the judge in 97.
okay.
Twyla Mason Gray, there was the Court of Criminal Appeals remanded the claims in the direct appeal in 97 for hearing.
Right.
And Twyla Mason Gray was the one who handled that portion of the basically supplementation of the appellate record.
Right. But then
she's the one who recommended that Glossip get a new trial.
Right. And then she was, though, actually
judge. Correct. And she was the judge for the 2004 trial.
Yeah.
Yes. But she wasn't the judge for the first trial. But she is the one who got him the second trial.
Right. So going back to the
stood behind his conviction.
Going back to this whole lithium thing, I mean, are they saying, I mean, did somebody in 1997 or 2004 ask the jail, is he on any medication? And the jail said no, and now they've allegedly found out.
No, okay. That's not the allegation. They're claiming the allegation, or what they're alleging, is that, well, lithium is prescribed for serious mental disorders, and that could have been used to cross-examine Sneed and impeach his testimony. Well, no, because bipolar disorder is a mood disorder. It's not a condition in which you have problems. Well, I guess if you're in a manic state, you can have problems with distinguishing reality and fantasy. But it's generally a mood disorder. You have highs and lows.
It's meant to stabilize your mood so you're not on a roller coaster.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I've worked with people who took lithium and they were lovely people.
You like lithium people. I do too.
But, I mean, and that's the other thing too, is that yet again, we're in 2023 and here they are stigmatizing mental health treatment and stigmatizing a mood disorder and making it look like it makes Justin Sneed the next Charles fucking Manson. Like he's psychotic or sociopathic. And, that's not what it is. Right. It's not a personality. Now, psychotic and sociopathic, that's Richard Glossip. Correct. You look up sociopathic in the dictionary, and there's a picture of Richard.
He checks all the boxes for being a predator.
Yeah.
And that is, if you look at anybody that's involved in his life and that he's able to manipulate, they've always been a lot younger. McDougal and company, he's manipulated them as well, because that's what predators do. They have a very systematic way of drawing you in. And that's what he did with Justin Sneed. It's what he did with his girlfriend he lived with at the hotel. He knows exactly who he can prey upon, and he knows exactly the moment when he's got them. And so I really am, as I read more and more of these things that we got in this report, I think, oh my gosh, this is we have a newly elected AG and he's corrupt.
Yes.
The dude hasn't even been in office for 6 months, and he is engaging in corruption and with respect to our justice system, as you always say, invading the province of the courts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm astonished that our Attorney General Gentner Drummond, by the way, AG Gentner Drummond, I'll say that one more time, is refusing to speak to the prosecutors in the case, yet paying Rex Duncan a hefty dime. And they've got these phone calls where Duncan is basically admitting that if not for the Reed Smith report, he would have been SOL. He wouldn't know that he got all of his information from that report.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
think
not an independent, Reed Smith is not an independent firm.
Yeah, that fiction and that fiction that's just disgusting. Be honest and say this anti-death penalty law firm is going to investigate this death penalty case. Because we don't like how the courts have handled it. And so we want somebody to tell us we're right.
Yeah.
And I have to say, Reed Smith followed all of the leads Don Knight gave them. Because Don Knight's the one who gave him Paul Melton. He's had all this information
right
since at least 2020 or 2019.
Right.
But he had sat on it because there were no executions scheduled. The Reed Smith, the purpose behind the Reed Smith report was to make all the bullshit look new. That was it. Don Knight, when they reset Richard Glossip's execution date, Don Knight realized, oh, fuck. I didn't pursue these things. I didn't file these things. My 60 days are long, long gone. What am I going to do? And Kenneth McDougal took Don Knight's dick out of his mouth long enough to say, I'll hire an anti-death penalty law firm for you.
Yeah. Well, that's what they did. And I didn't know until we got these documents. There's a state rep, actually named Justin Jackson, significant donor. He's the one who actually watched that one-sided docudrama and doing all the donating back and forth with the posse. And then McDougal got on board, and he was the one that was actually encouraging them to get on board with this thing a long time ago. Justin Jackson, just Humphrey. Then you've got Kevin McDougal, and then Rex Duncan. There's another person's name. I don't know. He likes to call himself Cowboy Bob or something like that. But these people are state reps in my state. And McDougal is in District 12, which is a district right near where I live. And it's just like with Julius Jones. I just don't, I am just, it is infuriating, and it is also unnerving, and to know that people in office are willing to lie to the people that vote for them and jeopardize their safety in the interest of political stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that is troubling. Another thing that's troubling for me is that in Rex Duncan's so-called independent investigation, he has attorney David Weiss, who is with Reed Smith, reaching out to Gary Ackley and asking to interview Ackley to aid Duncan in his investigation.
Right.
He's got, David Weiss reaching out to Lawrence Hellman for questions on 2 issues of concern for the independent counsel. So, I mean, Reed Smith is spearheading Duncan's report. He's got Vitale and Weiss communicating with Ackley.
Yeah.
And questioning Ackley. And I want to know, Gary Ackley, please, if you have any social media presence at all, please reach out to me, because I want to know, why are you talking to these people? You saw what Reed Smith did with the first report. why would you then give another affidavit to these people? I mean, I know you're being honest and you're trying to be transparent, but you're just playing along with their little game. I mean,
Mhm.
have they threatened you to come after you next the way they're coming after Connie Smotherman?
Yeah.
Please tell me why you're cooperating with them, because you've done enough. Tell them next time to go pound sand.
I mean, Rex Duncan is on. I mean, Rex Duncan told Miss Smotherman that the Reed Smith people were anti-death penalty folk.
Uh-huh.
And he
Yeah.
also said to her that he has said to her, I mean, this is a public, this is a record, this is on the record somewhere. He speaks to Reed Smith attorneys and Glossip's defense attorney often while working on the report. And yet he refuses to speak to her or the prosecutors in that case. He's saying, well, he's the only thing that he is saying to the prosecutors is, oh, yeah, here's what's going on. I'm talking to the Reed Smith people.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
that's another problem with Knight's claims is, they haven't talked to Connie Smotherman, and they're speculating about everything. This quote bombshell memo that they have about the questions regarding the knife, that's between
Right.
Connie Smotherman to Gina Walker, who was representing Justin Sneed.
Right.
It
Yeah.
in no way, shape, or form evidences Connie Smotherman trying to influence Justin Sneed's testimony.
Exactly. There
That's
was no
speculation.
bombshell. Yeah, exactly.
It's, and that's one of the reasons in November that those 2 writs or post-conviction relief applications, whatever they're called in Oklahoma, that's why they were denied, because they're based entirely on speculation.
Right.
Just as it's speculation that Connie Smotherman telling defense attorneys that the doctor that prescribed the lithium is named Dr. Trumpet. I mean, they could have gone to the jail and looked up who's their doctor, who's their psychiatrist, because lithium is strictly a psychiatric medication. So it's not going to be prescribed by your GP. It might be prescribed by a nurse practitioner under the care or under the supervision of a psychiatrist. But it's not something that's going to be prescribed. And, all those things, Lyman and Woodard could have already looked at those issues and decided they weren't material and they weren't going to help Richard Glossip. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
It's not going to help Richard Glossip to make Justin Sneed look that much more vulnerable to an older person controlling him by pointing out that he has bipolar disorder or any other serious emotional or mental problem.
Right. And on the topic of Justin, I mean, this whole thing about the confession, the whole coercion technique stuff. No. People can go to YouTube, watch the videotape of it, and they have the transcripts and the link. I mean, these are the Save Richard people that put the links with the transcripts and the video up there, and they use the same technique with Justin that they did with Richard. It's not coercive at all.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
It's like you said the other day, Justin they don't prompt him to say a specific thing. He answers those questions and he provides contextual details about the answers. They didn't provide him that information.
Correct.
He provided it because it was the truth.
Correct. And they weren't lying to when they said Glossip put it on you the most. They weren't lying, because Glossip did put it on Sneed.
Yeah.
But of course, he was still trying to protect Snead by saying Justin Taylor, because he always referred to him as Justin Taylor, not Justin Snead, in his interviews.
Right. Isn't that a step parent's last name or something?
Yes,
Okay.
that is. Justin Snead had gone by Justin Taylor.
Okay.
But I'm pretty convinced that Glossip knew him as Justin Snead, knew he used Justin Taylor, so he gave police Justin Taylor to keep police from finding him that much longer.
Right, I gotcha.
Because Taylor is a more generic name.
Sure.
And in that age group, Justin is a pretty common first name. So I think that, yeah, I think that he was still trying to protect Justin Snead by giving police Justin Taylor. And I think it was probably somebody else at the motel that gave him Snead.
Yeah.
But that is, and yeah, look at another thing that's disturbing is the contributions. Rex Duncan has contributed again to Drummond's campaign. Drummond contributed to Rex Duncan's campaign. And I mean, we're looking at 500, 1,500, 2,500. We're talking about $4,000.
Yeah.
From Duncan to Drummond between 2018 and 2022.
Right. Right. And
then
Drummond to Duncan between 2006 and 2017. And then Drummond to McDougal. Duncan to Justin Humphrey, who joined McDougal to hire Reed Smith, by the way.
But Justin Humphrey's only worth $100.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why.
And then, of course, Jackson to McDougal.
Yeah. Yep.
And then, 2000 from Jackson to Humphrey.
Yeah.
1,800. Of course, again, this contract, Duncan's getting $15,000 per month for a plagiarized report from Reed Smith.
Yeah.
Probably from a Don. I bet you I'm going to go on the OK anti-death penalty group site, and I'm going to look at Don Knight's 2015 press releases. And if Rex Duncan's report follows those freaking press releases, I'm going to blow it up on social media. Because then he didn't even write that report. He just dropped a press release written by Don Knight.
Yeah.
Not saying that's what happened, but that's my suspicion.
Well, you're likely correct. You're likely correct. I mean, he's been a lobbyist. Rex Duncan's been a lobbyist who helped out Representative Humphrey. Here's a little detail. He was fired as general counsel of the state Republican Party in 2022 because he disparaged Drummond's opponent, the acting Attorney General John O'Connor, who I miss dearly. John, where are you? In the AG race. It's just like I'm just, it's like I'm shell shocked because the Reed Smith people, all of these firms that McDougal and these anti-death penalty firms at the tail end of this information that we got, Reed Smith, MacArthur Justice Center, Oklahoma State reps even can hold their views about, what they think happened, this, that, and not, but not the Attorney General.
Yes.
The Attorney General for the state of Oklahoma, you took an oath and you represent the law It's a law that the people put in place. And if you come in on the tail end of a case, 25 years of determinations that Glossip was rightfully convicted, that must be your position as the Attorney General.
Yeah. Agree.
And if
And
it's not, then you're corrupt. And now you've got to go as quickly as you got here.
yeah. And Drummond doesn't claim he believes Glossip is innocent. Although at the clemency hearing, he kind of contradicted himself, because even though he said he didn't believe Glossip to be innocent, he also brought up the bullshit about the fact that, well, he was definitely accessory after the fact, but that's not death penalty. You know, it's like, no, he was more than accessory after the fact, because he concealed Barry Van Treese's dead body for, what is it? We figured about 17 hours.
Yeah.
He concealed it from investigators all day long, and he lied about the broken window. He helped fix the broken window. And, you know, there are a lot of points that Don Knight ignores, and a lot of points that he tries to dismiss, but it is a pretty extensive list without a single word from Justin Sneed.
Yeah. And so what I find offensive about it all is that he's relied solely on the anti-death penalty people, and his Boy Scout buddy. And in his position as AG, saying this is a position of the state of Oklahoma in this case. No, it isn't. Fuck off. You're lying and you're corrupt, and you are absolutely not expressing, you're expressing the opinion of like a handful of people who have been manipulated by Richard Glossip.
I disagree. I don't believe McDougal, Humphrey, or Jackson have been manipulated by Richard Glossip, because I believe that they are equally sociopathic, and they don't care about the truth. They just want their way. And their way is getting rid of the death penalty. I know you disagree, but I don't think that they really, I think their claims about the death penalty are just lip service, because they know that's what constituents want to hear. Because as you've pointed out, McDougal was involved in the whole Julius Jones debacle.
Well, I mean, he just tagged along on the train ride to try to pick up his own support.
And, you know, you don't do that when you support the death penalty and you have a case where there's DNA evidence linking the person on death row to a vital piece of evidence in the murder case. And it is irrefutable, and it is unrefuted.
Right.
So like I said, I don't think that they honestly believe in it. I think they say they believe in it, but they want to undermine it.
Okay, well,
and they want their way.
They don't get to, I mean, they are trying to undermine our justice system in Oklahoma. But Oklahomans are saying, no, you don't get to do that. We voted and we changed our constitution. That's what Oklahomans decided. I personally am not a fan of the death penalty because of this kind of stuff right here. But at the same time, Barry was murdered. There are survivor victims of his murder, and they are owed a justice for it. Somebody has to do the time for the crime, and all of the players do. And if a jury has decided death for one of the players, it is not up to me to insert my personal belief about the death penalty into the trauma that the Van Treese family continues to suffer to this day because of that phrase. I've read Mr. Cassell use this, dilatory delays, or however you pronounce that. I mean, how do you continue? How is it that it has slipped your conscience as an attorney general that even today, asking SCOTUS for another 30-day extension, how is it that it is not gotten and seeped into your soul anywhere that every delay that you ask for is another swing of that bat on Barry to his family? And I just can't imagine what they must be going through. And then having experienced what they experienced at the clemency hearing, again, we thought that Julius Jones thing was a shit show. But of course, that attorney general's office staff, those gals were on point, and that was fantastic. But that now we have this dichotomy, this whole contradictory thing where he only spends 5 minutes. It's like you might as well just spit on Barry's family while you were there. He left them in the lurch, and thank heavens for Derek, the son, who spoke eloquently, respectfully, and tersely, and with much love. And all of the kids that are grown now that spoke, I mean, you can just tell they were raised well. The way they spoke about Barry, and I mean, all they got was 20 minutes with no legal representation to talk about Barry's life, and how embarrassing and devastating that must have been, to know that the AG showed up and wasn't there to prop you up. I mean, I'm surprised David Prater or the likes of David Prater, and maybe even the Grady County guy didn't just stand up and kick his ass right there. I mean, I would have. I mean, I didn't know who all those suits were in the back of the room. Clemency. It turns out they were all district attorneys from different counties. Who were just like,
and that brings us back to another problem that I perceive with all of this, is that Gentner Drummond, the fix was in. He's been influenced, he's been elected, and now he's going to help Richard Glossip in any way he can, ignoring the rights of the victims, ignoring public safety. I mean, the system is supposed to be fair to both sides and to everyone.
Right.
And in this instance, it's no longer fair, because now you have the attorney general, who is supposed to represent the victims, who claims to be a victim's advocate, aligned with the person who committed the murder. And Richard Glossip did not swing the bat, but he sent Justin Sneed into that room with the bat to murder Barry Van Treese.
Which is pretty sinister. If you can get someone to commit murder, you have to think about that. How sinister of a mind you must be, and persuasive you must be, because it happens a lot. Get somebody else to do your bidding, and that's what he did.
And that, and to me, and in my mind, in murder for hire, the person who wants the murder to happen and engineers it is more culpable than the person who actually carries it out.
Right. It took me a long time to get that one, but once I got into all of the factual details of the case that you'd sent me over time, it really did begin to hit home.
Because but for Glossip's desire for Barry Van Treese to be dead, he wouldn't be dead.
Exactly.
Justin Sneed had no motive. And Don Knight, all this bullshit about robbery gone wrong.
Yeah.
It's just, it gets more and more disgusting.
Yeah.
First of all,
just
the
go
fact
steal the
that they're
car.
saying Barry Van Treese was a sugar daddy for a stripper at the strip club named Fancy or Mercedes, but nobody knows her Christian given name.
Yeah.
And I'm sure her mama did not name her Fancy or Mercedes. I would hope. Yeah, I mean, it gets more and more disgusting. And that whole false narrative about Barry Van Treese, who was a family man, who no one other than Richard Glossip has ever said a negative thing about.
Right.
That all comes from Richard Glossip, because he's the one that planted that seed in killing Richard Glossip by telling Berlinger, oh yeah, he used to mess around with prostitutes. So he's not only murdered Barry Van Treese physically, but now he is murdering his reputation.
Right. Right.
And giving false information that then Don Knight is knowing it's false, knowing he hasn't got a single shred of corroboration, is spreading it around.
Right.
I mean, that's the part that disgusts me the most. It's not enough that you're trying to get the murderer off death row, but you have to impugn the victim's character. You have to say the victim was messing around with prostitutes.
Right. And sorry.
Had I been Donna Van Treese, I would have gotten in Don Knight's face and said, listen here, motherfucker.
Yeah.
My husband did not cheat.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been in his face. I probably would have kicked him in the garage. And if I ever meet him, I probably still will.
Yeah. I mean, I just so want Don Knight. I want Sister Helen, Don, Dr. Phil. I just want all those people to get the F out of the state of Oklahoma. They don't know what they're talking about. It's okay that they're anti-death penalty, but it's not okay that they're messing with my family and friends and neighbors and Oklahoman safety.
Yeah.
By using Richard as a pawn. I mean, here again, see, they don't care if he's guilty or not. They're just getting on the train again. And if he's ultimately executed, well, then they'll say he's a martyr. Whatever.
Correct.
But the bottom line is that there is a sentence that they continue to create a delay for. And there is a family that, it will not give them closure. But our system owes them that just due that the jury said, guilty, here is the sentence.
Yeah.
You've taken advantage of every appeal that you could. It's 25 plus years. I don't know, there might be, I'm sure that there are other cases where the person has gone through, or the courts have thoroughly vetted every nook and cranny, but they have. And look, if you haven't come up with it by now, that's because it was never there.
Correct.
And there is a point. If you're Don Knight, I understand you are representing Mr. Glossip, but there is a point where now you're completely out of touch with that whole duty to candor in the tribunal. And now you're messing with people's lives.
Yeah, I agree.
And, I don't, you can say what you want about the players, Cliff Everhart, and, question the, well, this guy had this going on in their life or that going on in their life, so they can't be trusted. No, that's bullshit too. I mean, people go through stuff, or sometimes people tell fibs, but that doesn't mean they don't have integrity.
And all of those things could have been and should have been raised at Glossop's trial. And we don't have anything from Lyman or Woodard explaining why they didn't. Or saying, oh man, I never thought of that. And that's one of the problems with post-conviction defense is that a lot of times all it amounts to is somebody comes in and thinks of new angles and
Right.
tries to make those angles work.
Right.
And Don Knight is a petulant fucking child because
Mhm.
when the angles don't work, he whines about it.
Right.
And
his
I mean,
angles now are premised on factual innocence. See, he knows now all he's got to use is that one phrase and the court will look at it. Factual innocence.
yeah, but the court usually says what he's showing us does not amount to factual innocence.
Well, no, he doesn't, but that's, the courts, one of the appellate courts in the last year said, you've used up everything here and we're only going to look at factual innocence. So what do? They start producing stuff that says we have this Reed Smith report and factual innocence. Well, the irony of that is that the Reed Smith report doesn't say that Richard's innocent. They don't produce anything and say, look, here's the smoking gun that shows he's innocent. Don't do that. It's nowhere in that report. It's all just smoke and mirror stuff.
Yeah. Speculation
It
upon speculation, upon conjecture and theory and new theories of the crime, because that's all this robbery gone wrong. The robbery gone wrong is not exculpatory evidence. It is a new theory of the crime that could have been pursued because guess what, people? Richard Glossip, if Justin Sneed was dating a stripper named Fancy or Mercedes, we don't know her Christian name. Richard Glossip knew that. Why would he not tell his attorneys, hey, he's dating a stripper? They were robbing people at the motel. But again, they're lowering Richard Glossop's IQ so low, they're getting it below room temperature. They're going to get it as close to freezing as they can. And then they're going to say, poor Richard just sat in a chair drooling. And Deanna was running the whole thing.
And poor Richard allowed his brother to deal dope at the hotel.
Deal dope in the hood. And and Richard Glossop's accused, what is it, Ricky Pierce, Deanna Wood, John Beavers. I mean, he's listed multiple people. Those letters, that the Attorney General used in its response to one of Glossop's writs in 2022. Those letters are a treasure trove because he talks about Justin Sneed and Deanna committing the murder.
Right. Yeah.
Because Deanna had left him and supposedly married Van Treese, which I think is just a big old lie. And anybody out there, people have said Donna Van Treese married, or not, was it Donna Van Treese? There was some stupid, awful rumor, I think, about Donna Van Treese marrying another relative of Barry's.
I don't know.
And it's like, no, that's a horrible, stupid, ugly rumor. Shut your mouth. Because the real rumor is it was Deanna Wood. And who can blame Deanna Wood? Richard Glossip didn't give her a baby, and he didn't give her a Camaro, and he didn't give her those new boobs.
Right.
Because he got busted.
Right.
So she had every right to see if she could get another man to give her those things. And I hope she got it.
I think she lives in Tulsa somewhere. I think, who knows? Who knows? But the caveat of the simplest explanation is always usually the correct one. It's totally in play here. And I'm going back and I'm looking at all of these details. Glossip said, Glossip said, Glossip said, Glossip said, people that have no intention of ever reading the transcripts or looking at the case files. They say, well, the only reason he got convicted was because of what Justin said. No, that's not how our law works. You have to have corroborating evidence. So I'm looking at all these details, and they all start with Glossip said this, Glossip told them this, Glossip told the other guy that, Glossip did this, Glossip did that. I mean, so Justin Sneed isn't even in the first 10 pages of this.
Yeah.
It's all shit that Glossip said.
I mean,
they talked to him first.
When you and I were chatting last night, Justin Sneed was the cherry on top.
Yeah.
He provided the why to police. He provided the I did it because Richard Glossip told me to do it. Yeah. But Richard Glossip's lies and concealing the body and lies about how the window got broken, lies about 2 cowboys, trying to send police on wild goose chases looking for motel patrons who had speared away in the middle of the night, or trying to tell Kayla Pursley that one of the cowboys was in the Sinclair station. All those things, those are what led police to think something about Richard Glossip ain't right.
Right.
And he's involved somehow. We don't know exactly how. And we don't know exactly how deep. But he's been telling too many lies. Lying is consciousness of guilt. Hiding the body is consciousness of guilt.
Yeah.
Though that's like, I'm going to say investigation 101. So yeah, it's and I think Kevin McDougal's got to be one of the dumbest son of a bitches on the planet, because he's like, show me where he lied. Did you watch his 1-9 interview? He opens the interview up. I'm sorry, I lied to you guys yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Richard Glossip says he lied.
Right. And then writes an op-ed that says, here, I'm going to prove to you why Richard Glossip is innocent, and never proves why he's innocent.
Yeah. And he, it's the I call it the Don Knight 2015 Dog and Pony Show.
Yeah.
Because everything Kevin McDougal, Justin Jackson, Justin Humphreys, dumbass after dumbass, one and thing one and thing two, everything comes from the 2015 post-conviction. And none of it's true. Richard Glossip's conviction is based on Richard Glossip's statements, on Richard Glossip's actions and inactions.
Right.
All Justin Sneed did was provide a couple of strings that tied everything together.
Yeah.
And he didn't even provide the bow. Hiding the body for 17 hours is what tied the bow on Richard Glossip's conviction for capital murder or first-degree murder, felony murder, whatever it's called in Arkansas. I mean, Oklahoma. I'm sorry. My apologies. I'm getting tired.
I understand.
And I have West Memphis 3 on the brain now.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, Richard Glossip's words, action, inaction, that is why Richard Glossip is sitting on death row. Justin Sneed played a very, very, very small part. Justin Sneed wasn't even questioned until almost a week after Richard Glossip was arrested, charged as an accessory. So how can the police be building a case against Richard Glossip using Justin Sneed when they hadn't even talked to Justin Sneed yet?
Exactly.
That's another thing. The innocence fraud movement,
Uh-huh.
they really don't have a grasp or a concept of context, and they don't understand a timeline. And so when you look at the actual timeline of events in a case, you see all of the holes in their innocence fraud theories.
Right.
So,
But that's not, they don't care.
yeah.
It's really kind of reminiscent. I don't know if I would go all the way and saying it's the same, but you see these vestiges of QAnon bullshit. People that just don't live in reality. And they get on board with something via social media, not realizing that what they're doing is harming Barry's family.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like at some point, I'd love to look Mr. Drummond in the eye and say, now I want you to imagine that someone took a baseball bat to your wife's head, and somebody that you knew hid her body for 18 hours and didn't say anything about it, and then tried to lie about it, tried to blame somebody else, and then you have 25 years later an attorney general advocating for the person who was rightfully convicted of beating her to death. Is it sinking in for you, sir? I mean, you just wonder, how do they get, maybe it's just the nature of the beast of politics or the law. I mean, how do you get so disconnected from the reality of the lives that you are impacting? I don't, that just blows my mind. It stupefies me. And this report that we got about the prosecutors, that our own attorney general is refusing to talk to the prosecutor. It starts out with this great paragraph, man, and it's dead on, and it says the families of murder victims statutorily, morally, and emotionally rely on the state of Oklahoma through the attorney general to represent their positions for Barry's family. The system is failing them because of the actions and or inactions of our newly elected Attorney General Gentner Drummond, who took office less than 6 months ago. And you're damn right. I absolutely expect that the Attorney General is supposed to protect my interests in this scenario.
Yeah.
And based on what we have here, and I think what's fixing to come out here pretty quick, there's hopefully the kind of corruption that Oklahomans will go, whoa, wait a minute. No. You can't be attorney general and be corrupt.
Yeah.
It's like, nobody's going to call for an AG to step down if he's dinking around with health insurance. There's different policy stuff, but now you're getting into stuff where you have to wonder, wait a minute, he could do that to me or my family.
And there is, the conflict of interest and the fact that his investigation was never independent.
Never independent.
And there was no intent that it be independent. It's always been directed by Don Knight, and it is Don Knight sitting behind the scenes, pulling the strings and trying to and continuing to influence the court of public opinion. He's just found Kevin McDougal and Justin Humphreys who are willing to upstage him every now and then.
Right.
But it's all innocence fraud. And it's one of the most egregious cases of innocence fraud. because they repeat these same talking points. McDougal doesn't have the balls to speak to someone who disagrees with him. He just blocks them.
Right.
And ignores them and continues to tell the same lies he's been telling since about 2020.
Right.
When Don Knight came in and did his little presentation, 2015 Dog and Pony Show, Justin Sneed's a drug addict, a meth head, he's a bad guy. Yeah, and guess what? That's who your client pointed at Barry Van Treese and put a baseball bat in his fucking hands.
Right.
Don't even get me started there.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that for David Prater. You and I discussed this. What did McDougal do with Prater? He went to him and demanded evidence proving Richard Glossip guilty. Yeah. I don't even know David Prater personally, but the little bit I've seen about him, that ain't going to work.
It's not going to fly.
That's going to get David Prater telling you to go put a dick in your mouth.
Yeah, please somebody bring David Prater back. David Prater, attorney.
I would love to interview him.
I mean, listen, I've never met that guy personally either, but he's been there. That he was the DA in Oklahoma County for so long, and people didn't like him. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, are you crazy? I would love it if that guy were my DA.
When Don Knight had the 2015 Dog and Pony Show, David Prater came out in the in the rotunda of the Capitol, and he called a spade a spade. He said it was bullshit.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And Don Knight's response was, if it was bullshit, would I have these affidavits? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, what did your mama always tell you? You were pretty?
Yeah.
And smart?
Yeah. I miss David Prater. It's like, David, where are you? Please come back. Please come back. And
but he had those last few years with Julius Jones. He had some bullshit to deal with that I don't blame him if he decided to walk away. Because that was, I mean, wanting people trying to get a grand jury to investigate him for not letting Julius Jones out of prison.
Oh, yeah. Well,
you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Well, the same guy that did that had, if David Prater didn't signal on a left turn in his car, Jess Eddy would be wanting to petition for a grand jury. That's how it's always been that way. So, I mean, that wasn't, that probably didn't shock him at all, but I'm sure being the district, I mean, I just am grateful that he served for as long as he did. And I'm just selfish when I say, please back. But
the problem with that for me, and it applies to the reckless allegations being made about Connie Smotherman now.
Oh, I know it.
Is that, this can affect your life and your livelihood, even though there isn't a shred of truth to any of it.
Right.
And so I feel for Connie Smotherman being accused of heinous acts based on the imagination and speculation of Don Knight, Reed Smith, Rex Duncan. I don't care who the fuck. Yeah. It's wrong. Don't accuse her of wrongdoing unless you have the clear and convincing, beyond a reasonable doubt, evidence that proves she did something wrong. Because not telling the defense attorneys that Justin Sneed told her that he was seeing a Dr. Trumpet doesn't cut it.
Right.
Justin Sneed did not say I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Justin Sneed did not say I'm seeing a psychiatrist. So nothing provided Connie Smotherman with information that would have led her to believe that when Justin Sneed said, I didn't see a psychiatrist, that he was lying. And what maybe he associates psychiatry with laying on a couch and talking about your problems. And when you're in the Oklahoma County Jail, I am sure that is not how your visits with the psychiatrist go.
Oh yeah, no.
So
Not
maybe
at
he
that
doesn't
point.
associate that doctor as a psychiatrist because what he expects isn't what's happening during his visits with that doctor. So
Right.
to him, he's just a doctor.
Well, he struck me at the time and in the video stuff Justin did as, I mean, he was 18 or 19 years old, right? He struck me as extremely vulnerable,
Mhm.
100% vulnerable. He was right for the taking.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that he was any different once he got to the clink. And when I listened to him talk in 2015, he's still just straightforward, but he still seems like a very simple person. Christine Vitale or whatever her name is, she still tries to get at him in the clink
Mhm.
about that whole recantation thing. And I've told Justin's sister-in-law, you just tell him to stick to his truth. He did the right thing. He told the truth and leave it at that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, and that's another, that's another dead ball from Don Knight.
mhm.
Whether it's a sports metaphor or a physiological one. Yeah, that one, his letters, first of all, how is the prosecutor going to tell the defense attorneys that Justin Sneed is writing letters to his attorney using the word recant wrong? There's no evidence that the prosecutor ever had that information.
Right.
And I highly doubt that Gina Walker would have told Connie Smotherman, oh yeah, or Fern Smith, oh yeah, he wants to recant and get a better deal. Probably what happened was she told Justin, you're not going to get a better deal. You can't get a better deal. And if you don't want to testify, it's going to be a problem.
Mhm.
Now, we also know that Lynn Birch at the time was going to see Justin Sneed and saying, you don't have to testify. Here's the case. It says you don't have to testify when there's a retrial.
Right.
And that's why Lynn Birch, who Glossip was getting ready to fire, decided that he had a conflict and he was going to withdraw.
Right. That's right.
So, I mean, there's no evidence based on what they presented yet again that the prosecutors knew what was going through Justin Sneed's mind, because none of the letters from Justin Sneed are to the prosecutors.
Right.
They're to Gina Walker, his attorney.
Exactly.
And I would suggest that his attorney couldn't tell the prosecutors what was going on in his mind, because there's this little thing called attorney-client privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And unless he said, yeah, sure, go ahead and tell him, she's going to just deal with them to make sure she protects his interests.
Right.
And so again, they're complaining about something that the evidence they're presenting doesn't show any knowledge by the prosecutors of a desire to recant his testimony. And in the true sense of the word, even to Reed Smith in 2022, Justin Sneed has never recanted.
That's right.
Justin Sneed has not said to Reed Smith, oh, I lied. It was a robbery gone wrong with my girlfriend Fancy or Mercedes, but I can't remember her real name.
Exactly.
And it was a robbery gone wrong, and she really is the one that killed Barry Van Treese, and I was just there, and Richard Glossip had nothing to do with it, and I will testify to that fact. He hasn't given them an affidavit to that effect. He hasn't told them that. In fact, he stands behind his trial testimony.
Right. Well, and if you did go with the Mercedes, I don't know, my Christian name story and give Glossip a new trial, that's not going to work out.
No.
There's no evidence about that.
Yeah. There's no corroboration.
There's no corroboration. It's like, does Don, look, we just went through Julius Jones. Does Don and I think Oklahomans are stupid?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he does. He does.
But we're not.
From the looks of Don Knight, I think that he's been partaking in Colorado's recreational marijuana.
Yeah.
And because there were a few months there where I looked at him and I'm like, are you sure you're still an attorney?
Yeah.
Because you look like a fucking beach bum.
Yeah.
With the beard and the long, scraggly hair.
Well, that's what happens when you have to continue to carry on with this manufactured, my client shouldn't be on death row. It does. That is what lying does to you.
Mm-hmm.
It weighs on you. It causes your hair to grow. It causes you to probably, he looks like a guy who was certainly carried and held the torch of the lie. And the reality today, as we saw in the info that we got, is unfortunately for Barry's family and Oklahomans like me, Reed Smith has the anti-death penalty law firm, Reed Smith. They have gained total control of the narrative coming from the state about Glossip.
Yeah. And that's wrong.
Let me just say that again to Oklahomans. Our newly elected Attorney General has been bought and is now being bossed by anti-death penalty advocates. He has shit all over Barry and Barry's family and is not advocating for the victims at all. And he is advocating for Glossip. He is advocating for a rightfully convicted murder for hire killer. That is our Attorney General in Oklahoma today. And God have mercy on our souls about who he's going to screw over next.
And y'all, that Reed Smith firm, they from Texas.
Yeah.
And I've heard that y'all Texans and Oklahomans don't like each other a lot.
I think that's a football thing. I don't know. I don't know, but I know that Mr. McDougal had hired another firm in DC to do that, to write some amicus, which I read, by the way, and I thought it was this. I'm not an attorney and I don't know how to write legal briefs, but if they wrote that brief, I don't even know who wrote it. Somebody's grade kid wrote it or something. I mean, I know I was certainly willing to write anything before that clemency, because even Mr. Cassell, I think it was, and Dudley Sharp, and people are amazed that in Oklahoma, where it's death penalty central at the moment, that Oklahoma VIP, we are seemingly the only tried and true victims advocate organization. Like Mr. Cassell was wondering, are there no you mean you don't have any victim advocate attorneys in Oklahoma? No.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? We've got all these people that are coming up on death row because of that, the federal case that put it off for so long. And then of course this is like ground zero for it. And no, we don't have any. I mean, there's me and Amy and our contacts, and a gentleman who was an advocate like Mr. Cassell in California had asked me about us, and I said, well, look, there are things that we can do that a victim's rights. If you work in the DA's office as a victim's advocate, there are a lot of ways that they help victims But they still work for the DA and they still have to follow rules. And, you know, Amy and I have the capacity to not have to follow those kind of, there are things and people we can reach out to mobilize quickly if we have to. And that was part of what we did here. And well, like with you guys and Dudley Sharp, you know, continuing to encourage us to do that. And I mean, it just kind of came together that way. And
Yeah.
for Barry and Derek and that family, I'm just so glad. And I feel, I mean, I sent Derek a message today and I look, we're still with you, man. We're still fighting. We will be with you until the very, very end, until this is over. And we will. And they've got the greatest representation. I mean, that's just like hitting the lottery.
Yeah. And that'll be, you know, that's the thing to look forward to is the amici that are going to be filed. Drummond is, you know, he's out of his league. When it comes to those amici, he's out of his league.
Yeah.
In a big way, especially based on what's been uncovered about his quote independent unquote investigation.
Right.
So, and hopefully that will inspire more people, other victim advocates, victims' rights proponents out there to dig a little more and, you know, look at Kevin McDougal, Justin Humphreys, Justin Jackson, Don Knight, Amy Knight, Christina Vitale. I mean, anybody else you can possibly dig up. You know, they must have skeletons in their closets.
Well, I
Let's
mean,
see how they like it.
Right. Well, I mean, if you're live in Oklahoma and you're a survivor victim and there is somebody sitting on death row because they murdered someone that you are related to, and you are sitting back saying nothing as a victim survivor, I mean, I hate to say this, but don't sit back and say nothing, because that person on death row will be able to string this out for a good 15 to 20, 25, 30 years. And at the tail end of it, the anti-death penalty folks are going to get their hands on it. And they already know how to mobilize the media and get the docudramas. And before you know it, they are 18,000 steps in front of you. And now you're the criminal. And so if you are a victim survivor, you cannot be silent. You have to keep your voice out there at certain times to ensure that anti-death penalty folks, agenda folks, that politicians like Mr. McDougal, Humphrey, and that stupid posse of imbeciles don't screw you over when they're supposed to represent you. If you vote for somebody that's involved in any of this stuff, you have an obligation to vote for somebody else. So it didn't happen to my family. I mean, those are just things that people have really got to stop ignoring. It happened with the Howell family. I mean, they never dreamed that they would ever have to do anything once Julius Jones was convicted. Never.
Yeah.
And so that's a really hard lesson that victims, surviving families, or they learn it because of how much they suffer in silence.
Yeah.
For so long. And so the lesson here is you don't have to suffer in silence. You can speak out. You can do all kinds of things. And people like myself and Amy and you guys, you and Roberta, we're all always willing to speak out with you.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to reach out
Absolutely.
to Amy or Jennifer or Oklahoma VIP or this podcast, the Roberta Glass True Crime Report. There are, and you can find even on Twitter, on Facebook, you can find voices. In the Rodney Reed Stacey Stites murder case, I've joined with her family, and together we are speaking out and seeking justice for Stacey. In this case, I am seeking justice for Barry Van Treese. And Richard Glossip has a debt that he owes to the Van Treese family, and he's put it off for 25 years with lies and manipulations and false leads and false stories, but it's going to end. And I know some people feel like it won't, but I don't believe these writs are going to be taken by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Right.
For the reasons we've discussed, mainly
Exactly.
that they're not soundly supported by evidence. And once that happens, Gentner Drummond has to respect that the claim on which he's relying to brand the trial as unfair has been rejected, not only by the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals, but by the highest court in the United States, the last word.
Right.
And once that happens, he either has to do his job and request a new date, or he's going to have a very unpleasant time.
I mean, he's obligated by law. Isn't he obligated by law to, like, former AG O'Connor? He was obligated by law to set up these execution dates.
Yes. I think he's going to have a very unpleasant time if he tries to make up some more reasons, or Don Knight. I mean, and Don Knight's ability to fool, Don Knight's never fooled the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. It ain't going to happen. So Don Knight should just let the next date come and deal with the fact that Richard Glossip is guilty, and that in these 8 years, Don Knight has not found a single piece of evidence that proves Richard Glossip's trial was unfair, or that Richard Glossip is innocent. Knight's whole premise is a false premise based on the fallacy that Glossip's conviction is because of Justin Sneed, and that just isn't true. And that's what the Court of Criminal Appeals, that's why the Court of Criminal Appeals does not find any of his bullshit convincing. So, yeah, we'll have to see. I don't know how long it'll take, because obviously the Supreme Court could have dealt with these two writs before May 18th. And I am actually quite perturbed that they didn't. But I think that there are some people on the court now who are trying to get rid of the death penalty, and so they're delaying as much as they can when they can. And that's all I'm going to say.
Okay, so then let's say, so that we know how this process works, if SCOTUS doesn't accept their writs, what you said, then that means this is over and it's done. And so now that dissolves the stay?
Correct.
And then we go back to what our Oklahoma state law and constitution dictates, which is that now our attorney general by law must set a new execution date. And doesn't it have to be in a certain time period?
Well, the AG has to seek a new date from the Court of Criminal Appeals. It's the Court of Criminal Appeals that sets the dates.
He is obliged by law to seek it.
He is obliged by law to seek it, correct.
Is he obliged by law to do that immediately?
I would have to do more research on the law.
Okay.
But and so I don't want to speak out of turn.
Yeah.
On that. But yeah, I mean, because again, if the Supreme Court denies that second writ that Drummond supports based on the fallacy of failure to disclose the name of a doctor and failure to correct Justin Sneed's statement that he wasn't seeing a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
If the Supreme Court says we're not going to hear that, they deny that petition, then the grounds on which Drummond is hanging his hat cease to be viable. They've been rejected by the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. Now they've been rejected by the U.S. Supreme Court. And that's the only reason he's ever said as supporting. Of course, they'll probably go, well, Patricia High questioned him about the polygraph, and the polygraph report has never been produced to any of his attorneys.
Well, I mean, the amici are going to come in, and you said he'll get the 30 days. He'll probably get granted 30 days, so he can respond to that. So, I don't know.
The amici are filing by January 5th.
Right.
Or June 5th, rather, according to the thing.
Sorry. Yeah.
He's seeking an additional 30 days so he can address the amici. Again, I say, Don Knight's probably shitting bricks right now.
I mean, why does he get, I guess because he's the attorney general representing allegedly the state's opinion. Is that why he gets to address those things? Why does he
generally when a party asks for more time, they generally give more time.
But really,
at least once.
But I don't understand that thing though, because look, how many times have they been given more time? They've been given more time repeatedly.
They have not. Nobody in the current writ cases has sought additional time. Okay. Glossip filed his claim. The first writ was filed on time. The second writ was filed on time. The motion for a stay of the application for stay of execution was also filed on time, because they had that motherfucker ready to go when clemency was denied. So nobody in the two writs has ever asked for an extension of time. And usually when a party asks for one extension, they get it. Now, if they decide they need more extensions, that's going to be different. Conceivably, Don Knight could ask for more time to reply. If he gets a reply. I don't know if he gets a reply to amici. He gets a reply to respondent, but I don't know that he gets a reply to amici. But again, he could seek, if he does get a reply to amici, he could seek more time to do his reply. And right now, there's no date pending. So we're kind of in limbo. And that first writ has been scheduled and rescheduled multiple times. And based on the docket, it hasn't been scheduled again. I think they're probably going to consider the two writs at the same time in the same conference.
Well, it's interesting that ended up being this delay with them. Then it's like them requesting a stay with SCOTUS might actually have been the final nail in the coffin, because what they ultimately did was angered, the right kind of people in the victims advocacy world,
Mhm.
who
Yeah.
finally said, wait a minute, what just happened?
Yeah.
Oh, no. I've been doing this way too long, right? And they weren't going to stand for it. So
Yeah.
it is, yes, it's a delay, and you hate that delay, but at the same time, it's really not, my opinion doesn't matter. It's just my feeling that I am glad that the Van Treeses are getting the creme de la creme of advocacy, where they're going to be heard now. And so the delay, I don't know if it makes the delay worth it to them or not. I'm just so glad that they didn't just get some shit for brains out of law school and said, hey, I'll give it a try. I mean, they got that's just what is amazing about that. I don't know how to explain it other than it was just a God deal that how
and I think, I think I think it should be mentioned that you played a part in getting that assistance for them.
Well, no, we all
because
did.
you helped some of the moving parts get lined up.
I mean, we all did.
Yeah. No, and I'm not saying, but I'm saying your part was equally important, and you should take some credit, even just for spurring them in that direction. And like I said, getting the parts aligned so that they fit. And maybe I wasn't supposed to say anything about that, but I'm going to, because I really admire you for getting you got through the red tape.
And I really didn't. I really didn't. It's you and Dudley's, Roberta's voice in the back of my brain going, you gotta call that guy. You gotta call that guy.
Yeah,
Call that guy. And I did call that.
You had to make the call.
I did call him. I didn't expect what I didn't expect. And I'm not, somebody else had called him and he was busy. And then, so suddenly pulling in my driveway, I called him. I got this nudge, all 18 of y'all's voices in my brain. Make that call. And I made the call, and it just so happened that somebody else had the day before that I'd never met and didn't know. And there was something about that in relation to this case. It was the same case that made this attorney go, okay, wait a minute. And then all of a sudden, within 72 hours, things just went so fast. And then now, of course, we're in the bleachers. So that's okay. I'm glad to be in the bleachers. Somebody has to speak up. Somebody who can speak up has got to.
Yes.
And they're doing it. And I'm so glad for them. And I hope that our Attorney General and Dawn Knight and Meg Dougal and their little posse. I hope, it's sad. I mean, I hope they get their asses handed to them. And I hope they are not reelected come voting time. I suspect that maybe, I don't know. I mean, Gentner Drummond may not even make it very long as an AG. I mean, you can't be corrupt.
Yeah, I think the next thing on your list should be looking at, what are our ethical options to deal with Mr. McDougal, Mr. Humphrey, Mr. Jackson, and Mr. Drummond. And let's throw Mr. Rex Duncan in there while we're at it.
Yeah.
What are our ethical recourses under Oklahoma law? Ethical laws for politicians, ethical laws for executive branch. Because I'm sure hiring your childhood friend and paying him $30,000 for 2 months' work and another $90,000 contract on the Oklahoma taxpayer's dime is probably pushing the boundaries of acceptable.
Oh, are you
ethical.
talking about corruption? Are you talking about wading from ethical into the arena of corruption?
Yes.
I'll say that. I'll say it. Absolutely.
So.
And you're at least chest deep in it at this juncture. And people that live in District 12 over there in Broken Arrow, God, please stop voting for Kevin McDougal. He doesn't even really live in your district, by the way. He lives in a condo that smells like cat piss in downtown Tulsa. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about what you need in your district. He cares about him and his buddies, and that's it.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about keeping you or me or anyone safe. And that is just that just so keeps me, stuff like that keeps me up at night.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I work, I do public safety and alert neighbor stuff and community. I mean, I see it on people's faces every day, how, the public individuals have an expectation of their law enforcement. They have an expectation of the people that they elect. I mean, there's this thing that's always been out there for people where, you can tinker with any kind of policy, but keeping the public safe has seemingly always been this area that you just don't dink around with. And now it's suddenly a fair game.
Yeah.
And so politicians don't want to do the work, but they'll make laws so that you can shoot whoever you want, even if they just step over your property line. It's just, no, I elect you to make the policies to protect my family. I don't elect you to try to get killers and predators out of jail.
Right.
And just like what it says in this info we got, the attorney, those people are more dangerous than Richard. At this very moment.
Yeah.
They are free men. They hold the keys and they're trying to let him out, kind of like with Julius.
Yeah. And they're controlling the narrative and lying to the public and misleading the public.
Yes. That's correct.
Yeah. And on that note, sorry. Sorry,
what?
Jennifer.
No, I was just wanted to make sure we went back over these case notes. But everybody, anybody who's gonna read them has already read them. Richard Glossip hired Justin Sneed, manipulated him to kill Barry Van Treese. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. In 25 years of courts and appellate filings and decisions, at no time have ever said otherwise. And people just read this stuff with the eye of even just a fourth grader. It's real simple. And at this moment, we are in Oklahoma. We are back in, or the public safety crisis created by the Julius Jones train. We're in it now. This is the cancer that Martin Prey talked about from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
It has metastasized in a way, and it is killing us all, and it's going to kill us all because of the likes of a corrupt attorney general and a corrupt Kevin McDougal and a corrupt Justin Jackson and a corrupt Rex Duncan and Justin Humphrey. And those little boys have corrupted and really, I mean, there isn't anybody in this state that should feel safe. When
Yeah.
they go to sleep at night, you should know that the people that are supposed to protect your safety aren't.
And on that note, I think we're going to call it a night.
Are you sure? Because I can keep talking about this.
I don't know if Zoom's, I'm looking at the clock. I'm thinking, Zoom maybe getting ready to say, okay, I'm done. And I've had it happen and it isn't fun. So, but no, I think we're going to wrap it up. And of course we can do this again.
Yeah.
Anytime. Maybe we could do this when those amici briefs are filed and talk about the amici briefs.
Yes, you can do that because that's your bag. I'm learning as I go. I'm a great advocate, but the lawyers speak and the legalese, that is you and Amy's expertise. So I'll leave that to you.
Okay.
And before we close, again, to Barry's family, we are absolutely with you. We are right next to you, behind you, and we are holding you up, and we are going to do it until the bitter end. And I promise this is going to be okay.
Amen. All right. Thank you for listening to Based in Fact, a true crime podcast with Lisa O'Brien and my absent co-host, Kyle Evans. If you like the show and want to know more, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Facebook, or follow me on Twitter at O'BrienLN. Kyle and I will be back for episode 7, Oklahoma versus Glossip. We'll talk about these and other developments in the case, including the postponement of Glossip's May 18, 2023 execution date, his pending writs at the U.S. Supreme Court, and the pushback from victims' rights advocates who will be filing amici briefs before the court. Until then, stay safe. Good night.